Did medieval women just sit around waiting for their fathers to decide their entire future? Were they truly powerless pawns in a brutal game of thrones and lands? Get ready to rethink everything you thought you knew about love and power during the medieval ages, roughly from 500 AD to 1500 AD. These 6 women weren't just surviving, they were actively shaping their destinies, especially when it came to their hearts. Number 6. Isabella of France, the she-wolf and her unconventional choice. The year is 1308. A young woman, barely a teenager, steps onto English soil. Her name is Isabella, and she is the daughter of the powerful King Philip IV. Of France, she arrives in England not as a visitor but as a bride. Her groom is Edward II, the King of England, a man whose reputation for preferring the company of male favorites over affairs of state, and even over his queen, was already whispered across Europe. This marriage, like so many noble unions of the time, was a political arrangement, a pact of peace between 2 rival kingdoms. Isabella, Queen of England, was expected to provide heirs and look decorative, but Isabella had other plans, or perhaps destiny had other plans for her. Isabella's early years in England were not easy. Edward II had a deep and consuming attachment to Pius Gaveston, a Gascon knight showering him of titles and wealth, openly flaunting their closeness. Chroniclers of the time, such as Jean Froissart, described Gaveston as arrogant and the king as infatuated. Isabella found herself increasingly sidelined, her queenly dignity undermined, her pleas to her husband ignored. The political landscape was treacherous. English barons deeply resented Gaveston's influence, leading to unrest, and eventually Gaveston's execution in 1312 at the hands of the very nobles who sought to control the king. This might have brought Isabella closer to Edward, but it only paved the way for another favorite, Hugh Despenser, the younger, a man even more grasping and ambitious than Gaveston. Despenser and his father Hugh, Despenser the elder, quickly gained immense power and wealth, alienating not just the barons but the queen herself. They systematically undermined Isabella, restricting her access to funds, confiscating her lands, and even separating her from her children. Stories circulated among the English court, later recorded by chroniclers like Geoffrey Le Baker, of Despenser's cruelty towards the queen. Isabella, once a symbol of the Anglo-French alliance, became a prisoner in her own court, humiliated and increasingly desperate. Her marriage was a sham, her position precarious, and her husband, Edward, seemed oblivious to her suffering or unwilling to intervene on her behalf. By the early 1320s, Isabella's patience was completely exhausted. In 1325, a critical diplomatic opportunity arose. Her brother, the new King Charles IV of France, demanded Edward II pay homage for Gascony, an English possession in France. Edward, fearing to leave England due to the simmering discontent among his barons and his over-reliance on the Despensers, sent Isabella to negotiate on his behalf. This was her chance. She sailed to France, ostensibly as an envoy, but with a deeper, more personal agenda. Once in her homeland, Isabella transformed. Away from the suffocating influence of Edward and the Despensers, she found her voice and her resolve. Her brother welcomed her, and she quickly became a focal point for exiled English nobles and those who opposed Edward and the Despensers. Among these exiles was Roger Mortimer, a powerful marcher lord who had been imprisoned in the Tower of London for his defiance against Edward, but had staged a daring escape to France. Mortimer was ambitious and politically astute. He and Isabella, both sharing a deep-seated hatred for Edward II and the Despensers, quickly formed a bond that went beyond mere political alliance. Their relationship blossomed in France. It was a scandal that rocked both English and French courts, defying all norms of queenly conduct and marital fidelity. But for Isabella, this was not just a dalliance. It was a partnership of equals, a shared purpose. Mortimer, a man of action and influence, provided the military and political muscle Isabella needed to achieve her aims. Together they planned the unthinkable, an invasion of England to depose Edward II and the Despensers. Chroniclers like Adam Irmouth noted the open nature of their relationship and the widespread rumors that accompanied it. In September 1326, Isabella and Mortimer, accompanied by a small force of mercenaries and English exiles, landed in England. The invasion was remarkably swift and successful. Edward II, abandoned by his subjects and even his own household, fled. The Despensers were captured and brutally executed, their deaths a public spectacle of revenge. Edward II himself was apprehended, and in a move unprecedented in English history was formally deposed by Parliament. In January 1327, his young son Edward III was crowned king with Isabella and Mortimer acting as regents. Isabella had achieved her goal. She had overthrown a king, her husband, and taken control of England, all with the help of a man she had chosen, not for dynastic alliance, but for shared purpose and seemingly a passionate connection. Their rule, however, was not universally welcomed. The public became increasingly uneasy with the overt power of Isabella and Mortimer, especially with rumors of Edward II's mysterious death in Berkeley Castle later that year. Chronicler Thomas Walsingham implied that Mortimer had a hand in it. Their rule continued for several years, marked by high living and political maneuvering. However, young Edward III, coming of age, resented their control and the continued humiliation of his mother's open relationship. In 1330, Edward III launched a coup arresting Mortimer at Nottingham Castle. Mortimer was tried and executed for treason. Isabella, stripped of her political power, was retired to honorable confinement. She lived for many more years, often visited by her son, the king, and her grandchildren, a testament to her formidable will and her enduring legacy. Isabella of France chose her own path, a path of rebellion, of forbidden love, and of seizing power, changing the course of English history in a way no queen before her had dared. Number 5. Leonor Tellez de Meneses. From commoner to queen, a choice of love and ambition. The year is 1371. The setting is Portugal, a kingdom often caught between the powerful ambitions of Castile and the rising influence of England. In this volatile world, women, especially those of noble birth, were typically expected to marry for political advantage, to cement alliances, or to secure property. Their personal desires often took a backseat to dynastic necessity. But then there was Leonor Tellez de Meneses, a woman who defied these expectations, not with quiet rebellion, but with an open pursuit of her own desires, transforming herself from a married noblewoman to a queen, and then to a powerful, controversial regent. Leonor was already married when she met the King of Portugal, Ferdinand I. Her first husband was João Lourenço da Cunha, a nobleman of some standing, but certainly not a king. Their marriage was a conventional one. For their social class, likely arranged, Leonor was known for her beauty and her strong personality. King Ferdinand I was a young monarch often described by chroniclers like Fernão Lopes in his chronicle of King Ferdinand as impulsive and romantic. He was also at this point unwed. The meeting between Leonor and Ferdinand was, from the king's perspective, love at first sight, or at least intense infatuation. Leonor, for her part, seems to have recognized an extraordinary opportunity. She was a woman of ambition and a clear understanding of power dynamics. She saw in Ferdinand not just a suitor, but a path to influence, and a life far beyond what her current marriage offered. King, consumed by his desire for Leonor, embarked on a course of action that shocked the Portuguese court. And the wider European nobility, Ferdinand declared his intention to marry Leonor. There was a major problem. She was already married. He pressured the ecclesiastical authorities to annul Leonor's existing marriage to João Lourenço de Cunha. This was no simple feat. Annulments were usually granted only on specific grounds, such as consanguinity or non-consummation. The king's personal desire for Leonor was hardly a legitimate ecclesiastical reason, yet through a combination of royal pressure, political maneuvering, and perhaps some bending of the rules by the local bishop, the annulment was granted. João Lourenço de Cunha was compensated, but the scandal was enormous. On May 16, 1372, King Ferdinand I of Portugal married Leonor Teles de Meneses. She became Queen Consort of Portugal, a position she had actively chosen and maneuvered for. The marriage was deeply unpopular with the Portuguese people, who resented the king's choice of a woman of lesser rank, especially one who had been divorced for the sake of the king's passion. Riots erupted in Lisbon, a testament to the public's outrage, as noted by Fernão Lopes. They viewed Leonor as an ambitious upstart, a Jezebel, who had seduced their king and broken religious norms. Despite the public's disapproval, Leonor quickly asserted her influence at court. She was intelligent, resourceful, and ruthless in her pursuit of power for herself and her family. She promoted her relatives to high positions, accumulating vast wealth and lands. Her brothers and sisters were given titles and influential roles, further enraging the established nobility. She had a daughter, Beatrice, with Ferdinand, who would later become a pawn in the intricate dynastic struggles between Portugal and Castile. Leonor's reign as queen was marked by significant political involvement. She was not content to be a mere figurehead. She often advised Ferdinand on matters of state and even participated in diplomatic negotiations. Her rise to power, however, brought with it many enemies. The most prominent of these was the Master of Avis João, an illegitimate half-brother of King Ferdinand, who harbored his own ambitions for the Portuguese throne. When King Ferdinand I died in 1383, leaving no male heir, Leonor became regent for her young daughter Beatrice. Her position was tenuous. Her unpopularity, combined with the dynastic crisis, plunged Portugal into civil war known as the 1383 to 1385 crisis. Leonor, as regent, tried to secure Beatrice's claim to the throne by proposing a marriage alliance with King Juan I of Castile, which would have effectively merged the two kingdoms. This was a strategic move, but it was viewed by many Portuguese as a betrayal of their independence. The Master of Avis capitalized on this discontent, leading a popular uprising against Leonor and her Castilian allies. Chronicles of Fernão Lopes describe the intense public hatred for Leonor, culminating in her being besieged in Lisbon. The Master of Avis, supported by the people and much of the nobility, eventually triumphed. Leonor's regency ended in a dramatic overthrow. She fled to Castile, seeking protection from her daughter's husband. She died there in 1386, a powerful figure whose life was defined by her audacious choices in love and power, and the profound impact those choices had on a kingdom. Leonor Teles de Meneses was a woman who dared to marry a king, not by arrangement, but by actively seeking and seizing the opportunity, reshaping her destiny and that of Portugal in the process. Number 4. Joan of Kent, 3 secret marriages, and a life of defiance. The year is 1328. In the lush rolling countryside of Kent, England, a young girl is born into one of the most powerful and illustrious families in the realm. Her name is Joan, often called the Fair Maid of Kent, because of her renowned beauty. She is the daughter of Edmund of Woodstock, Earl of Kent, a son of King Edward I, and thus a grandson of the reigning King Edward II. This royal lineage meant Joan was destined for a life of privilege, but also one where her marriage would undoubtedly be a political chess piece, a carefully orchestrated move to secure alliances or consolidate power for the crown. Yet Joan of Kent chose her own path, not once but 3 times, openly defying the rigid social conventions of her era and the expectations of her royal family. Joan's first choice in love came early, and it was a bold one. While still a young girl, perhaps only 12 years old, she secretly married Thomas Holland, a relatively obscure knight. Their union was conducted without the necessary royal consent, an act of grave insubordination, especially for someone of Joan's high status. This secret marriage was a profound risk. Discovery could mean severe penalties for both of them, and for Holland it might even mean execution. The chronicles of the time, such as those of Thomas Walsingham, hint at the scandal and the defiance inherent in this act. Joan, even at this tender age, displayed an independent spirit that would define her life. However, the secret could not be kept forever. Around 1340, while Thomas Holland was away fighting in the 100 Years' War in France, Joan was married again, this time to William Montague, the young Earl of Salisbury. This marriage was arranged by her guardians, likely unaware of her previous secret union, believing they were securing a suitable match for the royal princess. So Joan found herself in an impossible position, legally married to two men simultaneously. This was not a situation a medieval noblewoman could easily navigate, especially without facing accusations of bigamy, a serious offense. When Thomas Holland returned from the wars, he revealed his secret marriage to Joan, bringing the entire scandalous affair to the attention of the church and the king. The ensuing legal battle was long and complex. The church, which held jurisdiction over marital matters, had to decide which marriage was valid. It was a highly unusual case, full of intricate legal arguments and public scrutiny. Despite the pressure, Joan stood firm in her claim to Thomas Holland. She testified that she had married him first willingly, and that her marriage to Montague was invalid because she was already bound by her earlier vows. The church, after much deliberation and examination of witnesses, eventually sided with Joan and Thomas Holland in 1349. Her marriage to Montague was annulled, and her union with Holland was declared legitimate. This victory for Joan was extraordinary. It validated her personal choice over a politically arranged marriage, setting a precedent for her independent will. Joan and Thomas Holland had several children and seemingly enjoyed a happy marriage for over a decade. But tragedy struck in 1360 when Thomas Holland died, leaving Joan a widow. She was still a beautiful and influential woman with powerful connections. Her story could have ended there, with her living out her days as a respected dowager countess. But Joan had one more audacious choice to make, a choice that would bring her directly into the heart of the English royal family in an unprecedented way. Enter Edward, the Black Prince, the legendary warrior, heir apparent to the English throne, and the darling of England. He was also Joan's first cousin, once removed. The Black Prince was deeply in love with Joan. This was a genuine romantic attachment, a passion that transcended political calculation. For Edward to marry a woman who was a widow older than him and who had a history of scandalous marriages was highly unconventional for an heir to the throne. Such a marriage would ordinarily be arranged with a foreign princess to secure alliances. But Edward was insistent. Joan, for her part, reciprocated his feelings. She chose to marry him, not for political gain, but for love, again defying all expectations. Their marriage, celebrated in 1361, was a love match. It generated a great deal of public interest and some quiet disapproval among the more conservative elements of the court, who perhaps remembered her earlier marital drama. But King Edward III, the Black Prince's father, eventually gave his consent, perhaps swayed by his son's determination and genuine affection. As the wife of the Black Prince, Joan became Princess of Wales and eventually Duchess of Aquitaine when Edward became its ruler. She accompanied him to France, ruling alongside him with a degree of influence rarely seen in a royal consort. She bore him two sons, including the future King Richard II. Her life with the Black Prince, though cut short by his early death in 1376, was a period of great personal happiness and influence. After the Black Prince's death, Joan, as the mother of the young King Richard II, became a pivotal figure in English politics. She acted as a calming and influential force during her son's turbulent early reign, especially during the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, when she reportedly bravely faced down the rebels. Joan of Kent, through her three distinct marriages, one secret, one contested, and one for love with the heir to the throne, demonstrated an extraordinary capacity for self-determination. She navigated a complex and often hostile world, always pursuing her own desires and asserting her right to choose her partners, leaving a lasting legacy as a woman who truly lived life on her own terms. Number 3. Eleanor of Aquitaine, the queen who divorced a king and chose another. The year is 1137. In the heart of southwestern France, a young woman of extraordinary wealth and intelligence inherits the vast and powerful duchy of Aquitaine. Her name is Eleanor. At just 15 years old, she becomes the most eligible and sought-after heiress in Europe, a ruler in her own right, controlling lands larger than the King of France's own domain. Her inheritance comes with a condition set by her dying father, Duke William X. She must marry Louis, the heir to the French throne. This marriage, while seemingly conventional for a powerful heiress, would mark the beginning of a life defined by audacious choices, not least of which involved a bold move to choose a new partner. Eleanor's first marriage to Louis VII of France was, by all accounts, a difficult one. Louis was a devout ascetic man, more interested in prayer and monastic life than in the lively, worldly, and politically astute Eleanor. Aquitaine, her home, was a vibrant, culturally rich court, full of troubadours, poetry, and a more liberal atmosphere than the austere French court in the north. Eleanor brought this vivacious spirit with her, but it clashed with Louis's solemn nature. Chronicler Suger, Louis's advisor, remarked on the incompatibility of their temperaments. They produced 2 daughters, but crucially no male heir, a significant issue for the French throne. Their marriage endured for 15 years, but it was fraught with tension and mutual disappointment. Eleanor accompanied Louis on the Second Crusade, where her independence and perhaps some indiscreet behavior, rumors possibly exaggerated, of a relationship with her uncle Raymond of Antioch circulated, further strained their relationship. By the time they returned, their marriage was beyond repair. They had grown apart, not just emotionally, but politically and personally. Eleanor, a woman who understood power and had a strong sense of her own rights, became increasingly frustrated with Louis's inability or unwillingness to rule effectively and to provide her with the influence she believed she deserved. In 1152, Eleanor made a truly shocking decision. She sought an annulment from her marriage to the King of France. This was an almost unheard-of move for a queen. Kings usually initiated divorces, often for political reasons. For a queen to pursue such a course, especially one who controlled such vast territories, was an act of immense courage and strategic thinking. The stated grounds for the annulment were consanguinity, meaning they were too closely related to marry under church law. While technically true, they were third cousins. This relationship had been known and overlooked at the time of their marriage. The true reasons were undoubtedly their personal incompatibility and the lack of a male heir, coupled with Eleanor's desire for a different life. Church, perhaps pressured by both parties who clearly desired an end to the union, granted the annulment. Eleanor was free, but she was also a woman of immense wealth and power in a tumultuous age. She was still Duchess of Aquitaine, and many powerful lords immediately sought her hand in marriage, eager to gain control of her lands. But Eleanor had her own ideas. She was not content to be married off again without her consent. She chose her next partner, and her choice sent shockwaves across Europe. Just 2 months after her annulment from Louis VII, Eleanor married Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou. Henry was Medoc, ambitious, energetic, and 10 years younger than Eleanor. He was also a man who possessed an extraordinary drive for power and was already building a formidable dominion in France. This was not a passive marriage. It was a strategic alliance that Eleanor actively sought and consented to. She saw in Henry a man capable of holding and expanding the power she desired, a man who shared her dynamism and ambition. Unlike the pious Louis, their marriage was swift, bold, and profoundly éve. It consolidated Henry's vast French territories and added Eleanor's Aquitaine, effectively creating a massive Angevin empire that stretched from the Scottish border to the Pyrenees. 2 years later, in 1154, Henry became King Henry II of England, and Eleanor became Queen of England. Their union produced 8 children, including 2 future kings, Richard the Lionheart and John. Their early years together were marked by intense passion and a shared ambition to expand their empire. Chroniclers like Ralph de Desato often alluded to the fiery nature of their relationship. However, their marriage, initially one of choice and shared purpose, eventually became as tumultuous as her first. Henry's numerous infidelities and his increasingly autocratic rule led to deep rifts. Eleanor, a proud and independent woman, refused to be sidelined. She famously supported her sons' rebellions against their father in the 1170s, an act of open defiance against her husband and king. This led to her imprisonment by Henry for many years, a testament to the iron will of both spouses. Despite her long imprisonment, Eleanor remained a formidable force. Upon Henry's death in 1189, she was released and immediately exerted her influence. She actively worked to secure her son Richard's succession and later ruled England as regent while he was away on crusade. She continued to play a significant role in politics well into her 80s, long after the death of her sons, until her own death in 1204. Eleanor of Aquitaine, a woman who divorced a king to marry a younger, more ambitious man of her own choosing, reshaped the political map of Europe. Her life stands as a testament to a medieval queen who exercised extraordinary agency, not just in her role as a ruler, but in her personal choices of love and partnership, leaving an indelible mark on history. Number 2. Heloise, the scholar who chose love over status. The year is approximately 1117. In the bustling, intellectually vibrant city of Paris, a young woman named Heloise is making a name for herself. She is renowned for her exceptional intellect, her mastery of Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, and her profound understanding of philosophy and theology. She is a true anomaly. For her time, a woman with a mind as sharp as any man, actively pursuing knowledge in a world where formal education was largely for men, particularly those in the church. Heloise lives with her uncle Fulbert, a canon at Notre Dame, who takes immense pride in her scholarly achievements. Her reputation reaches the ears of Peter Abelard, one of the most brilliant and controversial philosophers and theologians of the 12th century. Abelard, captivated by Heloise's intellect, seeks her out. He proposes to Fulbert that he live in his house, ostensibly as a lodger, but with the true intention of teaching Heloise. Fulbert, blinded by the prestige of having such a famous scholar as his niece's tutor, agrees. This arrangement, recorded in vivid detail by Abelard himself in his autobiographical work, Historia Calamitatum, The Story of My Misfortunes, sets the stage for one of history's most infamous and tragic love affairs. Began as a master-student relationship, quickly transformed into a passionate romance. Abelard, despite his clerical status, and Heloise, despite societal expectations for a young woman of her intelligence, fell deeply in love. Their intellectual connection sparked an intense personal bond. They exchanged letters, poems, and shared intimate moments under the guise of study. This was a forbidden love, not just because of Abelard's clerical vows, but also because of the strict social norms regarding relations between a tutor and his pupil, and the general expectation that women of Heloise's potential would eventually enter into an arranged marriage or a religious life. Heloise's choice to pursue this love was a conscious one. She was fully aware of the risks both for herself and for Abelard. When she became pregnant, the scandal threatened to ruin both their reputations and careers. In an effort to mitigate the damage, Abelard secretly took Heloise away to his sister's home in Brittany, where she gave birth to a son, whom she named Astrolabe. This secret birth was an attempt to contain the scandal, but it soon became clear that more drastic measures were needed. Abelard, deeply remorseful for the potential ruin he had brought upon Heloise and himself, proposed a secret marriage. This was an extraordinary proposition for a man in his position, as marriage would severely hinder his ecclesiastical career. However, Heloise, in an act that truly highlighted her independent mind and her complex understanding of their situation, initially resisted the idea of marriage. According to Abelard's account, she argued against it, citing the damage it would do to his esteemed scholarly reputation. She believed that a man of his intellectual stature should not be burdened by a wife and the responsibilities of a family. She even suggested that their relationship, while illicit, was pure and more intellectually equal without the constraints of marriage. Her willingness to sacrifice her own social standing for his career demonstrated a profound and unconventional depth of love and understanding. Despite her eloquent arguments, Abelard insisted, and they secretly married. The marriage was an attempt to legitimize their relationship in the eyes of the church, if not the public, and to appease Fulbert. However, Fulbert, still outraged by the dishonor brought upon his family, arranged for Abelard to be brutally castrated, a horrific act of revenge that ended Abelard's hopes for a career in the church and plunged both their lives into despair. Following this tragedy, Abelard compelled Heloise to take vows as a nun. Heloise entered the convent at Argentou and later became abbess of the Paraclete, a monastery founded by Abelard. Her decision to become a nun was in part forced by circumstance, but her subsequent life as a religious leader was defined by her intellectual prowess and her administrative skills. She became a highly respected abbess, known for her rigorous scholarship and her commitment to the spiritual life, yet her love for Abelard never truly faded. Their famous correspondence, written years after their separation and his castration, provides an intimate glimpse into their enduring bond. Heloise's letters reveal her continued devotion, her intellectual curiosity, and her deep pain. She wrote to Abelard, not just as a former lover, but as a fellow scholar, challenging his theological arguments and expressing her philosophical doubts. She chose to continue loving him, even in a context where that love could not be physically expressed. Her choice was not to deny her feelings, but to reconcile them with her new life, transforming a forbidden passion into an intellectual and spiritual companionship that transcended their physical separation. Heloise's story is a powerful testament to a woman who dared to choose love, not just in its romantic sense, but also in its intellectual and spiritual dimensions. She defied the expectations of her time, sacrificing social standing and enduring profound suffering for her connection to Abelard. Her choices, both in pursuing their initial romance and in maintaining their intellectual and emotional bond through years of separation, demonstrate a remarkable agency and a fierce independence of spirit. She remained until her death a profound intellect, and a woman who chose her own heart and mind, leaving an indelible mark on the history of medieval thought and emotion. Number 1. Adelaide of Burgundy, the empress who escaped a forced marriage and chose a king. The year is 931. In the ancient kingdom of Burgundy, a young princess named Adelaide is born. Her family is one of the most powerful in Europe, a lineage that connects her to kings and emperors. From a very young age, Adelaide is destined for a life of political marriages, her hand a valuable prize in the intricate game of medieval alliances and territorial expansion. Her first marriage at the tender age of 15 is to Lothair II, the King of Italy, a union intended to strengthen her family's position in a fragmented and often violent peninsula. This marriage, like so many for noble women of her era, was a political necessity, not a choice of the heart. Yet, Adelaide, a woman of extraordinary resilience and intelligence, would soon demonstrate an incredible capacity for self-determination, not only escaping a perilous situation, but actively choosing her become Empress of the Holy Roman Empire. Adelaide's marriage to Lothair II was short-lived. In 950, after only 4 years of marriage, Lothair died under suspicious circumstances. Rumors quickly spread that he had been poisoned by his powerful rival, Berengar II of Italy, who sought to seize the Italian throne for himself. With Lothair dead, Adelaide, now a young widow with a small daughter, Emma, found herself in a perilous position. Berengar, eager to legitimize his claim and gain control of Burgundy's influence, attempted to force Adelaide to marry his son, Adalbert. This was a classic medieval power play. Eliminate the rival, seize the throne, and then consolidate power by marrying the widow and heiress to a compliant family. But Adelaide was no helpless pawn. She fiercely resisted Berengar's demands. She refused to marry Adalbert, a clear act of defiance that put her life in grave danger. Berengar, enraged by her refusal, imprisoned her. He confined her to a fortress on Lake Garda, stripping her of her attendants and possessions, hoping to break her will. The chronicles of the time, including Hrutsvitha of Gandersheim's Gesta 20s, describe her harsh imprisonment and her unwavering resolve. This was a moment where Adelaide could have succumbed to pressure, but instead she chose to resist, to hold firm to her own desires and autonomy. Even when faced with overwhelming force, Adelaide, however, was not one to remain a prisoner. In a remarkable act of courage and cunning, she managed to escape from her confinement. The details of her escape vary in different accounts, but it was likely aided by a loyal priest and perhaps some hidden loyalists. She fled to Canossa, a strongly fortified castle belonging to Bishop Adelhard of Reggio, a staunch supporter of her late husband and an opponent of Berengar. From Canossa, she sent a desperate appeal for help to the most powerful ruler in Europe, Otto I, King of Germany. Otto I, known as Otto the Great, was a formidable and ambitious monarch. He had long harbored ambitions in Italy, seeking to revive the Carolingian Empire and claim the imperial crown. Adelaide's appeal, combined with her beauty, wealth, and royal lineage, presented him with an irresistible opportunity. She was not just a damsel in distress. She was a legitimate claimant to the Italian throne, a symbol of resistance against Berengar and a strategic key to his imperial ambitions. Otto responded swiftly. In 951, he led a powerful army across the Alps into Italy. Quickly defeated Berengar, who fled and rescued Adelaide. This was the moment of her true choice. When Otto arrived, he not only freed her from her predicament, but he also proposed marriage. For Adelaide, this was not just a rescue. It was an opportunity to choose a powerful protector, a husband who shared her ambition for high status, and a partner who could truly secure her future. She chose Otto. This decision was not forced upon her. She had actively sought his intervention, and now actively consented to their union. Their marriage, celebrated in Pavia in 951, was a momentous event. It solidified Otto's control over Italy and laid the groundwork for the establishment of the Holy Roman Empire. Adelaide, now Queen of Italy and Germany, became Otto's closest confidant and advisor. She was not merely a consort, she was an active partner in his rule, possessing a keen political mind and diplomatic skills. Contemporary sources, like Widukind of Corvus Res, Gestae Saxonici, often emphasize her influence and intelligence. 10 years later, in 962, Otto and Adelaide traveled to Rome, where Pope John XII crowned them emperor and empress of the Holy Roman Empire. Adelaide was the first empress of the revived Western Roman Empire, a title that reflected her extraordinary journey from imprisoned widow to the most powerful woman in Europe. She bore Otto several children, including the future Emperor Otto II, ensuring the continuation of the Ottonian dynasty. Adelaide's influence extended beyond her husband's reign. After Otto I's death in 973, she continued to play a pivotal role in the reigns of her son, Otto II, and later her grandson, Otto III. She served as regent for her young grandson, skillfully navigating court intrigues and maintaining stability in the empire. She was a strong advocate for the church and for the poor, founding many monasteries and convents. Her legacy as a wise and pious ruler endured for centuries. Adelaide of Burgundy's life is a powerful narrative of resilience and personal agency. She refused to be a victim, bravely escaping a forced marriage and actively choosing a powerful king as her partner, not out of passive acceptance but out of a clear understanding of her own desires and the political landscape. Her choice not only secured her own future but also profoundly shaped the course of European history, establishing her as one of the most remarkable and influential women of the early medieval period.